Amazing truth revealed. Millionaire's shocking paralysis test led to an inspiring transformation. In one split second, Jack Thompson's world upended. After decades navigating the cutthroat corridors of finance in Chicago, his heart sank as the ground rushed up, a dizzying fall through the clouds diverting him from the summit he'd conquered. He now found himself on a stark hospital bed, a mere shadow of the self-made millionaire he used to be, robbed of his independence and grappling with the terrifying reality of paralysis. The machines beeped, reminding him he was alive, but in those cold, sterile walls, he felt more like a ghost. Each day blended into the next, drifting in and out of physical therapy sessions, confined to his thoughts, and palpably aware of the silence that consumed his life. Where had everyone gone? His phone remained stubbornly silent, and the dizzying rush of meetings and celebrations faded like a forgotten memory. Jack's chest tightened with every unanswered call. Had he really been just a man of money, not a friend? The contradiction gnawed at him. The very friends who had once celebrated his triumphs now appeared to be celebrating their own success, withheld from reaching out to the man whose achievements had once inspired envy. Could they truly understand the isolation that seemed to wrap around him like a leaden cloak, growing heavier with the days? Frustration surged as the monotony of rehabilitation wore down his already wavering spirit. As he stared at his unmoving legs, anger brewed deep inside him, an undertow threatening to consume any flicker of hope left in his heart. He felt stuck in an unending night, longing for the dawn of his past life, the rush of adrenaline that came with every deal closed. He questioned his worth as time slipped through his fingers. Was he defying fate only to be trapped in this limbo of desperation? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The turning point appeared in the form of Emily, a nurse who walked softly across the harsh brightness of fluorescent lights. Her warmth felt like an embrace against the clinical chill. Jack found himself opening to her kindness, but with each shared moment, a different conflict brewed within him. Who was he now? The millionaire's charm felt redundant, almost grotesquely out of place. Yet, she introduced him to others who had their own battles. Soldiers, disabled and resilient, laughing against the current of despair. They shared not just experiences but real-life stories of courage that beckoned to the diminished man Jack had become. A flicker of hope ignited in him. Could he redefine his life's purpose beyond profit margins and stock tickers? As he began attending their gatherings, he felt the stirrings of strength within, not wealth born from dollars, but a richness found in community. But what would happen to him in his social circles? Would they welcome this new Jack, or scoff at his naive preference for empathy over their polished, profit-driven conversations? Just as he began to embrace this transformation, shadows loomed. Whispers of opposition started to circulate among his old acquaintances, each critique echoing with a weight Jack hadn't anticipated, deepening the tension within him. Standing on the threshold of a pivotal gala, addressing the elite who'd once lavishly applauded his successes, Jack's mind reeled. Would they recognize his newfound purpose, or dismiss it as frivolity? What would remain of his dignity if they turned their backs? He inhaled deeply, the microphone heavy in his grip, ready to confront them, and himself. His pulse quickened as uncertainty flooded through him. Was this journey one of redemption or folly? The stakes had never been higher, and as he stepped into the spotlight, the truth hung in the air. Can silent promises of change resonate with those who once only believed in gold? Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he took his place in front of the gilded audience, a vibrant swirl of silk, laughter, and clinking glasses. The room buzzed with chatter, an electric hum contrasting the lonely silence he had come to know during his hospital stay. The bright lights illuminated faces that once reflected admiration, now veiled in curiosity tinged with disbelief. He felt their gazes dissecting him, his outward scars just as visible as the ones deep within. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words felt heavy, fettered by layers of doubt. What did he want to say? Beyond his personal struggle, what meaning could his transformation hold? Haunted by questions, he swallowed hard, an involuntary move that echoed with the bitterness of unspoken sentiments. "Ladies and gentlemen," he finally began, his voice steady despite the world teetering on the brink of his revelation. "I stand before you not just as a man recovering from an accident, but as someone who's grappling with the very essence of existence, a challenge I never foresaw amidst my financial triumphs. I've learned that success doesn't solely rest upon how much you earn, but on how deeply you connect with yourself and others." An uneasy murmur trickled through the audience. They shifted slightly in their seats, careful not to reveal the discomfort his vulnerability was eliciting, and it caused a creeping sensation of isolation to seep back into his chest. What if he was losing them forever by revealing his true self? Meanwhile, the fear of failing to connect whipped through him, igniting a quiet storm of internal conflict. As he spoke, memories surged, moments from boardroom battles and high-stakes meetings where his voice commanded authority and his decisions wielded power. Yet, there he was, starkly aware of the worthlessness of that former identity. The applause that once filled his soul now felt like hollow echoes, fading against the backdrop of genuine connection he yearned for. The sincerity with which he addressed the crowd began to pierce through his anxieties. He took a breath, feeling the faint trace of hope blossom within. He was not merely on the precipice of failure, he was standing at the edge of enlightenment. "I discovered the truth. Being connected is a form of wealth that transcends monetary gain. I will use this journey, this opportunity, to advocate for those unheard, those who fight battles you cannot see." The audacity of his statement hung in the air, interrupted only by the sound of glasses clinking and whispers rippling through the room. This was where the tension escalated from mere discomfort to a palpable challenge. He had ignited curiosity, but had he ignited their willingness to reevaluate their understanding of success? Would they reject him entirely, or could he draw them into his newfound reality? Direct confrontations loomed on the horizon, especially from David, a rival he had once bested in every possible venture. Jack could feel David's disdain beneath the surface, seeing through the facade of a polished elite that only revered achievement at any cost. As Jack continued speaking, he couldn't shake the anticipation of impending opposition. Their shared history twisted in a new light. What would it look like now? The whispers grew louder, taunting him, challenging his resolve. Just as he glanced in David's direction, a scowl hardened the man's lips. Jack hadn't just stepped into a new role. He understood he was picking a fight with the fabricated image of success that had clasps around him. As he closed his speech, the applause began, but it was tentative, uncertain. Had he struck a chord? Or had he just alienated those who had once supported him? Jack stepped back, breathless and unsteady, uncertain if he had lost a part of himself or gained something profoundly transformative. The moment hung, suspended in time, and he realized, while rejuvenation was possible, the real challenge awaited him in navigating the reaction of those who had been pillars of his past. He didn't yet know how deeply those connections could be reshaped, or if he had the strength to endure their setbacks. But one thing was clear. He had started something within himself, igniting a personal revolution. As he left the stage, Jack was struck by a dawning realization that the journey toward true connection had only just begun, and he would have to confront not only his past, but every confrontation yet to come. What awaited him in the realms of judgment and acceptance would define the depth of his transformation. Stepping away from the stage, Jack felt a lingering rush of adrenaline mixed with uncertainty. The audience's reaction had shifted him from spectator to participant in a drama of his own making. Emotions surged within, relief, fear, hope, a kaleidoscope representing his evolution or downfall. The whispers hadn't ceased upon his departure. Instead, they morphed into a cacophony of muted opinions and self-reflective judgments. He leaned against the cool surface of a marble pillar, fighting the urge to retreat into himself. Jack's heart raced, each beat a reminder of both the past he was unraveling and the uncertain future spiraling ahead. He was a man caught between who he had been, the shrewd businessman whose worth was defined by spreadsheets, and who he aspired to become. With each passing second, the boldness he had summoned on stage began to wane, leaving doubt in its wake. "Jack!" came a voice, sharp and critical. David strode toward him, his presence a storm brewing on a clear day. There were no pleasantries exchanged. Their history dictated the kind of confrontation that would arise. That was quite the performance, turning weakness into some heartfelt plea for connection. How original. Jack turned to face him, a mix of defensiveness and determination bubbling within. "I wasn't performing, David. I was being honest." The sense of clarity grounded him, anchoring his stance. Honesty or desperation? David's smirk widened, a striking contrast to Jack's earnest expression. "You've been out of the loop for too long. People don't want to hear about vulnerability. They want results, Jack. They want to see strength." David's words struck a chord, not just in Jack's mind, but in the deeper recesses of his psyche. Was he truly abandoning strength by pursuing meaningful connections? He contemplated the mythos of success he'd once clung to like a lifeline. In this new reality, did success terminate when stripped of profits and power? "And what does your version of strength look like?" Jack challenged, biting back the simmering irritation. Fake smiles and backroom deals, trading empathy for profits? For a fleeting moment, Jack thought he saw uncertainty flicker in David's gaze, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You've lost your edge, Jack. This quaint idea of connection doesn't suit you." The weight of his words settled heavily on Jack's heart. Clenching his fists, he reminded himself that he was not who he used to be, no longer obligated to measure his worth against David's disdain. Meanwhile, an ember of rebellion ignited within him, propelling a new resolve. "You know," Jack replied, the tension fueling his voice, "with every ounce of bravado you boast, I see someone who is terrified of authenticity. You're afraid that your strength is just as fraudulent as the connections you profess to value. Maybe it's time for you to look in the mirror." David's expression morphed into a sneer, and for a moment, Jack relished the victory of striking a nerve. But beneath that fleeting satisfaction loomed a deeper truth. What lay beneath his own surface? As David stormed off, Jack was struck by a new anxiety, one that questioned his own ability to stay grounded in authenticity amidst the turbulent waves of judgment that surrounded him. Just as he caught his breath, another voice interrupted his thoughts. Rachel, a colleague and unexpected ally, approached him with a look of concern. Her understanding gaze pierced through the layer of bravado he was still struggling to uphold. "You did great, Jack, but now you need to be prepared for what comes next. Are you ready for the confrontation, the real test of who you've become?" That question hung palpably between them, a challenge awaiting resolution. Jack realized that this was just the beginning. With each connection he desired to nurture, there loomed the risk of truth being met with hostility. Could he maintain his newfound self-awareness while navigating rampant opposition? Determined yet trembling at the precipice, Jack nodded, understanding that commitment to vulnerability would demand grit. The path to transformation would be riddled with confrontation, but what could potentially unravel could also heal. Jack steadied himself, contemplating his next steps. He had just ignited his journey. How would he wield the flames of confrontation? Only time would reveal whether he would succumb to the pressure or emerge as the man he was destined to be. The moment for awakening clarity had arrived, but shadows lingered ahead. Jack stood near the pillar, drawing a steadying breath as Rachel's words echoed in his mind. The realization that vulnerability could be his greatest weapon and his most significant weakness hung in the air. He was on the precipice of a transformation, but the path forward promised both trials and revelations. "Ready for what comes next?" he whispered to himself, the boldness of his earlier stance feeling both distant and imperative. As he walked away from the bickering remnants of his past with David, the world around him came into sharper focus. The grandeur of the venue, the polished floors, and the vibrant energy of the crowd felt surreal, as if he were seeing everything through a fresh lens. This was no longer merely a gathering of business elites. It was an arena to confront his demons and expand into the man he needed to be. But first, there was the matter of his next presentation. That evening, he was scheduled to lead a panel discussion on leadership centered around authenticity and financial responsibility. He found himself unsettled by the weight of expectation. Were investors really ready to embrace a new model shrouded in emotional connections rather than hard metrics? A sudden thought jolted him. Am I still a businessman? Or am I becoming something else? This question circled in his mind like a persistent fly, clinging to his consciousness as he made his way to the green room. Inside, severed from the chatter of the outside world, Jack could finally hear his thoughts clearly. Stripped of his previous corporate armor, he felt exposed. The dread of vulnerability skittered across his skin like a chill. Would he uphold his new ideals in the face of a skeptical audience? The stakes felt monumental, the potential for backlash tangible. He clenched his fists, channeling that unease. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been silenced by the so-called need for strength. Could he embody the message he truly believed? He paced within the confines of the room, drawing determination from his reflection in a mirror. His eyes met his own, a self marked by uncertainty, but now unmarred by dishonesty. Moments later, Rachel re-entered, her presence calming yet charged. "You have to believe in what you want to say, Jack," she urged, her voice a mix of encouragement and challenge. "These people are craving authenticity. It's time to return to that stage with a sense of purpose, not fear." He nodded, acknowledging her insight, but grappling with the rawness of her suggestion. He could choose the familiar route, a safe retelling of company successes draped in polished rhetoric, or he could carve a new path, one where connection mattered more than margin estimates. But with this choice came inevitable resistance. What if they didn't want to hear the truth? Perhaps there's a way to marry both, he pondered aloud, the gears in his mind beginning to shift. What if he provided a storyline of success while directly linking it to the human elements that fed it? His strategy began to take shape. What if I share my experiences, the truths that challenge my perceptions of strength? Jack mused, almost to himself. Yes, Rachel's voice pierced through. Show them your journey. It will resonate. People need to feel they're not alone in their struggles. With her encouragement, he scribbled down notes, weaving a narrative that entangled business acumen with human vulnerability. As he pieced together his talking points, a swell of conviction replaced the earlier doubt. He could embrace both his professional ambitions and his commitment to authenticity, but tension clawed back as he remembered David's cutting remarks, and a surge of doubt crept in. Would those who dismissed vulnerability find redemption in his honesty? He had angered David, a bitter rival. Would others follow suit? His internal debate was interrupted by an announcement. It was time to go on stage. Jack took a deep breath. In a game of risk, there lay both victory and defeat. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown as he approached the mic. Jack could sense the audience's laser focus, some skeptical, some intrigued. This was the moment that mattered. The collision of his past and future awaited him inside the arena of confrontation. But little did he know, the most potent challenge was yet to arise, forcing him to confront not just the audience, but the shadows within his mind and heart. As he focused on the crowd, a thought flared bright. Was he truly ready for what lay ahead? The stakes were higher than ever, setting him up for a path filled with revelations and confrontations that would test the very core of who he had become. Jack stepped into the spotlight, the warmth of the stage lights washing over him, providing a momentary cocoon of comfort amidst the rising tension swirling in his gut. The polished wood of the podium felt foreign and reassuring at the same time, grounding him as the weight of expectation bore down on his shoulders. He glanced at the audience, faces etched with curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation. They were waiting for something. But what? A quick surge of adrenaline pushed him forward. "Good evening," he began, his voice amplified but shaky. "We live in a world where numbers can often speak louder than words. They paint the successes we boast about, the profits we chase, and the growth we strive for." He paused, letting the words hang in the air for a heartbeat longer, before diving deeper. "But what if I told you that behind every success story, there's an untold narrative of struggle, vulnerability, and resilience? What if the true measure of leadership is not derived merely from spreadsheets, but from the humanity that we bring into our interactions?" As he spoke, his hands moved, punctuating his words with fervor. He was weaving a narrative that melded hard business truths with softer, more personal revelations, each thread stitching together the realities of his journey. Jack felt the audience shifting, their collective gaze intensifying. Some seemed to lean in, rows of interest shifting beneath the surface, perhaps in recognition of a deeper truth. "Let me share a moment from my past," he said, kicking off a story steeped in self-reflection. "A few years ago, I found myself cornered in a boardroom filled with naysayers, my every idea met with dismissive responses. I was playing the game without truly understanding its rules, and I became paralyzed by fear of judgment, fear of failure." The honesty of the memory struck him anew, a blend of shame and empowerment. He continued, revealing how it took the brutal honesty of a mentor to break through his rigid facade. As he shared the pivotal lesson that vulnerability could lead to strength, Jack could see glimmers of recognition in the audience's faces, as if notes of his own struggles resonated within their silent battles. Yet, as the story unfolded, shadows of doubt crept in. The name of David stirred in his mind like a serpent. Would the truths Jack shared strengthen the connections he was desperate to forge, or would they serve as fuel for the skeptics? The internal conflict simmered beneath his professional persona, a reminder of the backlash he feared. His voice wavered momentarily, but he steadied himself. "I learned to embrace my vulnerabilities, to let them guide my decisions and to lead with empathy. But it wasn't easy. There were always voices telling me to put on a mask, to adhere to expectations. I had to confront my own limitations every step of the way." He felt his heart racing, each beat echoing his growing resolve. There was power in laying bare his truth, and a realization that his path forward depended on it. In this moment, unexpected clarity sparked within. Could this be the moment he reclaimed not just his narrative, but also his identity as a leader? He could already feel it. The edges of doubt were softening against the tide of connection he was establishing with the audience. Then, out of the azure tapestry of his thoughts, a flicker of self-doubt ignited again. Would they see him as a leader, or as a man floundering in his own vulnerabilities? The whisper of fear wrestled with the burgeoning sense of self. He took another breath and pressed on. "If there's one lesson I want you to take away from this, it's that every setback can propel us forward, if we let it. Strength is found not in masking our fears, but in confronting them boldly." As he concluded, a wave of determination washed over him. The applause that followed felt both a release and an invitation, an acknowledgement of shared struggles. Yet, lurking beneath the cheers, an unsettled feeling made its home in the pit of Jack's stomach. The interaction was meant to be transformative, but how might it pull him into a deeper confrontation with those waiting to pounce on any hint of his faltering? Just as he turned away from the microphone, a frantic wave from the side of the stage caught his eye. Rachel was rushing towards him, her expression a blend of excitement intertwined with urgency. "Jack, there's something you need to know," she urged, her voice barely a whisper, yet charged with tension. Whatever lay ahead promised not just further confrontation, but a revelation about the depths of his risks, and potentially the consequences of his newfound authenticity. Rachel's urgency sliced through the applause, pulling Jack from the reverberations of his speech. The room felt both crowded and isolating, the bright lights narrowing his focus to her wide eyes. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, tension and curiosity intertwining in his chest. "David," she said quickly, glancing over her shoulder as if fearing he might materialize from the audience. "He's not just watching, he's mobilizing a response. Let's talk more privately. We need to strategize." An unease spread through Jack, entangled with an adrenaline rush from the stage. The renewed recognition that David was out there, ever the antagonist, loomed over him. He nodded, leading Rachel off the stage, their footsteps echoing in the hushed hallway leading backstage. As they entered a small, dimly lit room, Jack glanced out the window to clear his mind. He noticed the reflection of his own face, a mask of determination barely concealing the turmoil beneath. "What are you saying? Does he plan to undermine what I just said? To twist my message?" "Not exactly," Rachel replied, crossing her arms defensively. "He's planning to publicize the weaknesses you just exposed. You put yourself out there, Jack, and he's looking for any crack where he can push through." Jack ran his hands through his hair, feeling the weight of his own authenticity like a double-edged sword. The confession of his vulnerabilities had ignited interest and empathy, but now he could hear the whispers that would undoubtedly come. He's not strong enough to lead. He's faltering. It was the language of skepticism, the tape playing in the back of his mind. "But what if my message is strong enough to rise above that?" he questioned, grappling with a flicker of defiance. "If I'm vulnerable and it resonates, can't it empower instead?" Rachel regarded him, her expression softening. "Of course, but don't underestimate David. He will twist narratives to serve his agenda." She walked closer, her voice lowering. "You're fighting against much more than just a voice. You're battling a reputation." Jack stared out the window again, the skyline blurred by his racing thoughts. He needed to fortify his stance as a leader, rather than retreating into self-doubt. Could he capitalize on the risk he had taken? A faint spark flickered deep within him, a notion that perhaps vulnerability could become his shield instead of his weight. "What if I use this situation to further propel my message?" he blurted suddenly, adrenaline propelling the idea from his mind to his lips. "What if I challenge David directly, publicly? That could turn what he intends into an opportunity for me to solidify my stance on authenticity and resilience." Rachel looked skeptical but intrigued, and that gave him strength. "You'd need a solid plan. Direct confrontation could do more harm than good. He's known for being manipulative, Jack. You have to stay 3 steps ahead." With each word exchanged, Jack felt his determination sharpening. Yet, the internal battle raged on. Half of him feared the repercussions of turning the spotlight on David, while the other half recognized this very moment as a defining test of his growth. Would he fold under pressure, or would he rise? "Maybe you're right," he conceded, his mind juggling the danger and opportunity. "But if I run away now, I am giving him exactly what he wants." The tension thickened, and he could feel the clock ticking. He didn't just have to be a leader. He had to embody the change he wanted to see. He needed to show not just his own stepping out moment, but how leadership could indeed be interwoven with the fabric of vulnerability. As that thought settled into his mind, Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression shifting to one of urgency. "We need to decide now. David's already crafting his narrative. If we're going to act, it has to be immediately." With a surge of resolve, a new plan formed in Jack's mind. "Let's go back out there. If he wants a confrontation, I'll give it to him on my terms." Rachel raised an eyebrow, impressed by his newfound tenacity. "Okay, but we need to dress up your message. We can't risk it backfiring. You have to be not only honest, but also shrewd. Jack nodded, clarity settling over him like a warm blanket, igniting something deeper within. He wasn't just confronting David's power. He was challenging a system that thrived on fear and silence. As they turned to leave, a fresh flooding of energy coursed through him. He wasn't the man overwhelmed by doubt anymore. He was ready to claim the narrative, standing tall against the naysayers and ahead of the doubts. But outside that tiny room, little did Jack know, the plan he was about to execute would set off a whirlwind of chaos, leading to an unexpected revelation that could change the trajectory of his journey forever. Was he truly prepared for what lay ahead? Time was running short. Decisions had to be made before it was too late. The moment Jack stepped back into the light of the auditorium, the atmosphere felt electric, as if every heartbeat synchronously ticked toward an impending storm. The audience, still buzzing from his earlier speech, shifted their focus to him, unaware of the internal war waging in his mind. The air crackled with anticipation, and their expectant gazes served as both a fuel and a burden. Rachel moved swiftly by his side, her presence a comforting anchor. Remember, keep your message clear. You need to affirm your intent, confront David, not just as an antagonist, but as a symptom of a larger issue, she murmured, subtly guiding him toward the stage. Jack took a deep breath, his spine straightening with resolve. He could do this. Behind the welling anxiety, there was a burgeoning fire, ignited by the sheer need to reclaim the narrative. Each step taken toward the podium crystallized his purpose. He was going to turn the tables and use David's impending assault to solidify his own voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jack began, his voice ringing clear and unwavering, "I stand before you today, not to be an infallible leader, but to be a real one. I've made mistakes. I've faced challenges. But it's how we address our weaknesses that ultimately shapes us." The backdrop of his earlier vulnerabilities framed a new context. He was not just a leader, but a human being grappling with the same uncertainties as everyone else. The crowd acknowledged his genuine remonstrance with muted murmurs of agreement, and he pressed on. "You see, there's a narrative brewing, one that aims to portray me as fragile, as weak. But I refuse to let that narrative be written by someone else." Jazz from the audience rippled through the air, though Jack's heart beat faster. Could vulnerability transform into strength? He needed to prove it, to not only reassure himself, but inspire others clinging to the shadows of their own uncertainties. "Let's confront David and his camp head-on," he continued, the words pouring forth with unexpected clarity. "Rather than hide behind bitterness and criticism, I say we welcome both scrutiny and challenge. I will not run from my vulnerabilities. I will use them to connect, to build, and to learn. That is leadership." Across the room, numerous faces shifted, excitement stirring alongside skepticism. Glances exchanged between wary allies hinted that Jack's boldness was wrestling with an age-old belief, the misconception that showing vulnerability would undermine his credibility. But Jack felt the weight of their doubt transform into a more familiar feeling, a determination to rise up against the tide. He was tired of others dictating who he should be. David may have turned the spotlight on him, but Jack intended to illuminate the truth instead. As waves of tension washed over the crowd, Jack felt a surge of urgency. "I challenge David, and anyone who believes that strength equals invulnerability, to join me in a new conversation, a conversation about what it means to be human." A flicker of a smile crossed Rachel's face, a small victory in crafting a new narrative. Then, just as momentum began to build, something shifted in the air. Jack felt it before he saw it. The dimming of lights momentarily caught him off guard. Whispers erupted in the audience as a figure emerged from the back, a shadow that sent tremors through Jack's resolve. David stood there, eyes glinting with malice, arms crossed like a judge ready to deliver a verdict. "Interesting performance." David's voice sliced through the murmurs, fully penetrating the room. "But is authenticity truly your strength, or just a masquerade for your weaknesses?" Jack's resolve wavered for a heartbeat. David was ready for a duel of words, and the game had just begun. Jack needed to stay centered, to strategize with sharpened wit and unyielding tenacity. As the audience turned their attention to this looming confrontation, Jack felt a familiar adrenaline rush, fear intermingled with exhilaration. Was he ready to delve deeper into this battle of minds? Time was slipping away, and so was the safety net he hoped to cling to. Would Jack remind himself of his newfound strength, or would he falter under the weight of David's attacks? The outcome hinged on the course of the exchange, and Jack was about to discover whether his journey of transformation could withstand the impending chaos. The tension in the auditorium thickened as David's voice echoed ominously. The moment hung like a suspended breath, and Jack sensed the collective gaze of the audience sharpen in anticipation. Was this the point where he would either solidify his newfound identity or succumb to the fear that had always shadowed him? Drawing on the resilience building inside him, Jack forged a quick plan. One strategic part of him wanted to swing back at David with an immediate retort, but a deeper part recognized that emotional confrontations could often disarm rather than empower. He needed to redirect the narrative toward growth instead of ego. "David," Jack responded, his tone firm yet inviting, "your skepticism is not unwarranted. Authenticity can appear vulnerable, but it's the very core of what makes us relatable. Instead of a masquerade, I view it as the catalyst for change." He could feel the energy of the audience shift again. Some were leaning forward, intrigued, while others furrowed their brows, wrestling with their ingrained notions of strength. Jack was on the precipice of a powerful message, not only to David, but to everyone listening. Let's expand the conversation. What does it say about the kind of society we foster when we equate success solely with unyielding strength? Jack pressed, his hands gesturing to emphasize the importance of the community's role in making space for imperfection. We may all wear masks at times, seeking to hide our faults, but true leadership embraces the whole of our experience, the successes and, yes, the failures. It's time we owned our stories. David's reaction was instantaneous. He stepped forward, breaking the space that had been pulsating with Jack's energy. "This isn't about stories, Jack. This is about results. You can't paint failure with a brush of virtue," he countered sharply, his expression challenging, attempting to rally the audience back to his point. That statement struck a nerve within Jack. Behind the bravado was a deep sensitivity to accomplishments defined by rigid metrics. What David didn't understand was that every perceived weakness had its own story of growth. Jack's path wouldn't be measured by checks on a list, but by resilience cultivated through hardship. "There's a dichotomy in your perspective, David," Jack replied, maintaining composure, though his heart raced. "Success without embracing our vulnerabilities is hollow. It creates a culture devoid of humanity. If we mask our failures, we forfeit the opportunity to evolve." Eyes among the crowd began to dart back and forth, as if each syllable unwrapped a layer of deeper understanding. Jack was acutely aware of the importance of having the right presence during this standoff. He needed to remain steady, to showcase the connectedness of vulnerability and authenticity as essential pieces of personal development. "The crux of leadership," Jack stated, eyes now locking onto David's, "lies in acknowledging our fears and using them to propel us forward, not create walls. My journey, my story, is a testament to the strength born from such honesty." Silence settled for a moment, as the audience resonated with the weight of his sentiments. A few faces around him softened, as if they were slowly beginning to embrace the possibility of a different perspective. David snorted dismissively, but Jack had seen a flicker of recognition in some audience members. The subtle nods, gentle exchanges of glances. This battle was becoming something more than just a clash of ideals. It was turning into an exploration of the vulnerabilities they all wrestled with. Jack leaned into the moment. "So I invite you, David, and everyone here, to consider a simple question. What if we try to redefine strength together? Instead of opposing vulnerability, let's uplift each other's stories. Let's pave the path to true leadership by showing what we are capable of when we are authentic. The murmurs rose again, fluctuating between approval and dissent. But within Jack, a powerful realization crystallized. He was not just engaging in a verbal duel. He was instigating a movement, a chance to reclaim the narrative around personal transformation. Just as he began to feel the tide shift, Rachel's hand gently squeezed his shoulder from behind, offering a grounding presence. But then, something in the far corner of the stage caught Jack's attention. Another figure stood there, cloaked in anticipation and curiosity. A tilt of the head, a stranger watching closely. Was someone taking notes? Too few were still playing the game of expectation. Jack could sense another storm brewing behind this one, and it unnerved him. The potential for allies was worth exploring, but this newcomer could reveal hidden dynamics yet to unfold, or worse, cast shadows on his emerging clarity. Jack needed to navigate the next steps wisely. He felt, deep within, that the curtains were lifting not just on his performance, but also on layers of personal truth, yet to be exposed. As he squared his jaw, he prepared for the unfolding revelations that might challenge him more than any grappling with David ever could. In this evolving atmosphere, Jack grasped the gravity of his journey, how far he had come, and how far there still was to go. Would he be able to consolidate his power without faltering in the presence of unexpected revelations? The air felt charged once more as he ventured onward. Jack's attention lingered on the figure in the shadows. He sensed an undercurrent of tension as he locked eyes with the observer. The atmosphere vibrated with an electric anticipation, and he felt suddenly exposed. It was as if the universe had orchestrated a moment that tested him beyond the confrontation with David. Who was this person? What were their intentions? His heart drummed in syncopation with the murmurs from the audience, and thoughts raced behind the veil of his composed exterior. Was this someone who could either challenge or bolster his mission? The idea of stepping further into the spotlight ignited both fear and excitement within him. "Focus, Jack," he murmured under his breath. "You're here to speak your truth." With renewed determination, he refocused on David as the rumbles of the crowd subsided into a reluctant silence. "You see, David, leadership is more than just achieving results. It's about the journey that adds depth to those results. It's about inspiring others to overcome their own fears and fostering an environment where authenticity thrives." David's furrowed brow indicated that he was wrestling with his own thoughts, but Jack could sense that the momentum was shifting. The audience was no longer a faceless expanse. They were individual minds, grappling with their own definitions of strength and success. Then, just when Jack thought he could maintain this course, the stranger's movement caught his eye again. The figure leaned forward, revealing a notebook and a pen, making meticulous notes. What could possibly be so significant? The weight of that attention felt like a spotlight illuminating his every uncertainty. It was then Jack was struck by the realization that their presence acted as a mirror to his growth. He was transforming before everyone's eyes, but at what cost? Doubt crept into his mind, whispering uncertainties about whether he truly had the authority to lead such a discussion. "Jack," Rachel whispered softly from behind him, her tone bringing him back to the moment. "You're really doing this. Just stay true to yourself." "Thanks, Rachel," he replied, drawing strength from her support. Jack returned his focus to his audience, the fluctuating faces of those who had once been mere silhouettes now becoming expressions of concern, curiosity, and engagement. He needed to harness that vulnerability they shared and elevate it into strength. "Consider your own experiences," Jack implored, his voice steady. "What made you feel strong? What lessons emerged from hardship? Each of us carries a narrative that, when shared, not only lifts us, but also binds us to one another in resilience." He leaned forward, inviting the crowd to reflect and engage. "In this shared space, let's challenge the norms together. What if the strongest among us are those who dare to embrace their fears instead of hiding them?" The murmurings began again, now charged with a sense of curiosity rather than skepticism. Jack noticed the stranger jotting notes faster, almost feverishly. Their engagement felt like a sign of validation. As he pressed forward, now fully immersed in this newfound conviction, he addressed the dichotomy of vulnerability and strength once more, feeling the urgency of his message cascade through every word. He began to feel like he was orchestrating something larger than just words. He was catalyzing a transformation, awakening the dormant courage within those seated before him. By the time he concluded his acceptance of vulnerability as a source of strength, sweat clung to his brow, yet his spirit felt elevated. The challenge had transformed into a conversation, an evolving dialogue on acceptance and authenticity. But just as he prepared to step back, an unexpected voice resonated from the back of the auditorium. What about the consequences of that vulnerability? Are we prepared to face them? The question hung in the air, compelling Jack to confront an aspect he hadn't addressed, the darker side of vulnerability that could expose individuals to judgment. The seriousness of this new challenge threatened to overshadow his triumph. Could he guide the audience through this deeper inquiry? Jack's heart raced once more, the stakes rising as he prepared to tackle what could become a daunting detour in his journey toward empowerment. Who knew how this would unfold? The opportunity to confront real consequences loomed ahead, ready to shape not just the narrative of the evening, but the course of his own transformation. The atmosphere in the auditorium took a palpable turn as Jack faced the unexpected question. For a moment, the room felt suspended in tension, the hum of curiosity hanging thick in the air. Uncertainty flickered within him, but he quickly reminded himself that he had ventured into this arena to provoke thought, to invite discourse, and to thrive in vulnerability. He inhaled deeply, centering himself as he processed the query posed to him. Consequences of vulnerability indeed, he began, allowing his voice to resonate within the walls. To step into your truth can invite criticism, skepticism, even dismissal. But isn't there incredible strength in knowing those consequences and still choosing authenticity? The questioner's face was lit with a blend of challenge and curiosity, and Jack seized this opportunity to further engage the audience. When I risk being seen, when I showcase my imperfections, I do so with an understanding of the potential backlash. Yet those very experiences shape our courage, and ultimately, our connections with one another. He gestured toward the audience, tapping into the shared experience that bound them all together. Each of you might have faced vulnerability. Reflect on how it has played out in your lives, perhaps throwing yourself into a difficult conversation at work, or sharing a personal story to create a deeper connection. Did the opinions of outsiders erase the value of your authentic expression? Jack saw heads nodding, a ripple of understanding thawing the skepticism that had settled over some of his audience. He had become a vessel of authentic discourse, attacking the fears that lurked in the shadows, encouraging others to embrace their truths. I believe, he continued, that while vulnerability may expose us to judgment, it builds a revolutionary bridge to understanding and acceptance. Yes, there are risks involved, perhaps losing respect or facing rejection. Yet, in the same breath, there are monumental gains, fostering trust, igniting connection, and creating an environment where meaningful dialogue flourishes. The stranger in the back leaned forward, writing intensively. Jack noticed the attention. He could sense an evolution occurring not just within himself, but among those who watched him. He pressed on, invigorated by the shifting landscape of the room. Let's redefine the scope of vulnerability as an opportunity. Think of it as a compassionate invitation to explore your authentic self, and by doing so, allowing others to loosen their holds on societal expectations. It's in embracing our shared humanity that we find our strength. As he spoke, an exhilarating liberation surged through him. This was where Jack had envisioned his transformation leading, to a space where dialogue about bravery and authenticity could take root, causing shifts far beyond their understanding. Instinctively, he scanned the audience, seeking recognition of his point. He spotted nods of appreciation, eyes widening with interest, and an electrifying sense of connectedness blossoming. Jack felt his confidence solidifying into an unshakable foundation. He was steering this narrative toward profound realization, all from the dramatic moments he had endured. Then, Jack turned back to the figure who had questioned him. "You see, while I cannot guarantee that there won't be consequences, I can assure you that our collective vulnerability will yield tremendous rewards for ourselves and for those we wish to influence." A smattering of applause erupted, an initial spark igniting more supporters. It was as if Jack's truth was bridging gaps, creating waves of understanding. He expanded on his vision, elucidating how authentic leadership, when rooted in vulnerability, could carve pathways to innovation and empathy. "I stand before you," he asserted, strength radiating through his words, "not merely as Jack Thompson, a man in recovery. I stand here representative of humanity's desire to connect beyond fear." The room reverberated with affirmation, encouragement wrapping around him like a cloak of support. Jack stepped back from the podium, feeling the swell of validation from the audience. He had embarked on a journey of transformation, a voyage that had tested his resolve and reshaped his identity. The applause was louder now, and he relished the familiar pulse of success stemming not just from monetary accomplishments, but from meaningful connections. Yet, beneath that validation lingered the presence of the figure in the back, ever receptive with that open notebook. Before he could ponder further, Rachel approached him, her smile bright against the backdrop of the bustling atmosphere. "You did it, Jack. You brought them back to humanity." He nodded appreciatively, but something else was circulating in his thoughts. The moment was still not over. The stranger had become a source of curiosity, and as he backed away from the podium, he made a mental note to uncover this new dynamic. Stepping into the corridor after his speech, Jack felt buoyant, yet grounded. The recognition of his transformation settled in. He had reshaped his identity from the confines of a millionaire's isolation into a leader advocating authenticity. Yet, with that realization came another. The community he had yearned to build had begun to materialize, but the true test awaited him, the question of whether he could sustain this and continue to develop. The journey of a newfound purpose was still ongoing. If vulnerability illuminated strength and connectedness, could he maintain that revelation without wavering? As the challenges of acceptance loomed, Jack found himself facing the precipice once more, not just of a professional transition, but one steeped in personal growth and community involvement. His heart swelled with promise as he ventured back into the vibrant thrums of life beyond the auditorium. That stranger in the shadows, the evolving narratives, and the courage needed to face the worldly challenges ahead coalesced into a singular understanding. Jack was now on a path filled with potential to conquer the hurdles that lay ahead, strengthened by the knowledge he had gained and the community he was fostering. It was within this context of personal revelation that he felt the undeniable impetus to push forward. Jack Thompson was not just a man reborn in vulnerability, he was an agent of change. With measured steps filled with newfound clarity and electric resolve, he turned his gaze toward the future, ready to seize the transformative moments yet to come. In this continuous journey, Jack embraced the empowered vision awaiting discovery. A life where leadership, authenticity, and connection flourished unfettered, where every challenge became an opportunity for growth. To redefine success did not merely mean reshaping his reputation. It involved weaving the fabric of humanity into every facet of that existence, including the hard conversations and revelations yet ahead. And just like that, a new chapter began, one that promised to intertwine profound lessons, rich connections, and an unwavering commitment to inspire. He was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As he exited into the world beyond, filled with a palpable energy and renewed sense of self, Jack knew he had carved out a space for himself, a space where true transformation was not just a destination, but infinitely woven into the very threads of life itself. But the journey was still unfolding, and the excitement of the unknown beckoned. What role would he play as a catalyst for change? What revelations would emerge from the continued exploration of authenticity and leadership? With those questions echoing in his mind, he was propelled forward, ever eager, knowing that the heart of his journey was just beginning. Now, to you, the reader, I implore you, don't merely watch from the sidelines. You need to subscribe now to the channel to dive deeper into transformative stories like Jack's. This is the moment to show your support, so that we continue to share the journeys that matter. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, propelling these messages of resilience to new heights. And I want to hear from you. Comment your reactions and theories about this narrative. How has it inspired you to embrace your own authenticity? Finally, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of vulnerability and transformation. Don't wait even one more second to spread these compelling tales of courage that illuminate the path we can all walk toward personal fulfillment. Your engagement fuels this community of overcoming stories.